Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, Elizabeth, and want to first of all say that she has shown a consistent interest in NCCC, and so I welcome her. Elizabeth, we have for the second time managed to not engage with Professor Chris Wallace. She just simply didn't turn up today.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So we are in the middle of a rambling discussion about basically three things. One is the state of community consultation and how serious the government really is and the planning agency really is in engaging with community. The second is urban densification and the different attempts to find ways of putting more housing choices into old suburbs. And the third one is housing affordability. So we've been discussing, for instance, the recent investigations into the attempt by the government to um, exempt public housing and medical establishments from third-party appeals. And NCCC has put in a very detailed submission that was taken up by the committee, that the justification for these changes is flawed, because there is no evidence whatsoever that medical or public housing projects were seriously hindered by third-party appeals. The second is what's coming up now is the whole question about the missing middle and the zoning changes that are proposed to be implemented in order to um, um, provide more housing choice in the old suburbs. And the third one that NCCC has been insisting on is in the context of public housing, affordable housing, and in the context of urban densification, the need for large-scale public housing investment. So that's what we've been discussing. And Ian briefed you more or less about these issues. And I'm really sorry to say that Chris Wallace has again, that's the second time now, we had an agreement with her. And she simply didn't turn up because we feel that what she's doing is really interesting in this context.
Mm.
So, if you have prepared something, do you want to um, tell us about it, or I have another teaser if you want to get your teeth into. And that is my take on the district strategies.
No worries. Well, first, I'm just going to say thank you so much for the invitation to join you and for that lovely introduction as well. And thanks, Ian, for the very detailed email that you sent through to my office as well, which, of course, outlined some of the concerns that the NCCC has. You may recall that at the end of last term, in the lead up to the election, we obviously made a number of announcements in relation to housing and, across the board in terms of public housing through to community and social housing through to housing affordability and residential development. And I think we actually pushed out quite an ambitious and creative platform when it comes to housing, including working very closely with community housing providers, looking at some of the tax settings, looking at the ways that we can improve our planning system, and of course, a balance between that sensible urban densification, whilst of course making sure that release of new land for single dwellings was also part of that mix. And I'd always advocated for a sensible balance when it comes to housing options, because I think, and Malcolm, you talked about housing choice as well, and that was a term that was thrown around quite a lot, but from what we could see in the last term at least, the Labor Greens government didn't seem to be giving people much choice. And that was why we obviously took a bit of a different approach. Obviously, I've got a different role this term. First and foremost, I was always a member for Kurrajong, so local member always comes first. But I did have the hat of being a leader last term, which I don't have this term. So I'm not in the shadow cabinet, and of course, it's quite early in the term. But in relation to two of the major issues that you referred to here, the first one is, of course, the TPP legislation, which there was an inquiry into by the Standing Committee on Environment Planning, Transport and City Services. And I know that you did a very comprehensive submission and appeared before that inquiry as well. And of course, you saw the 5 recommendations that came out of that report and the various players on that committee and how they voted and came to those conclusions. So I'm not going to repeat the report. I'm sure you probably know it much better than I do, but you saw what came out of that. Ultimately, of course, it'll be up to the government to respond to those recommendations, and there is nothing to say that they have to accept them or not. So we await to see how they go with that. The difference in terms of the dynamic in the Assembly this term, of course, is that Labor is in minority government. So back in the day, the committees would, in all good faith, undertake an inquiry, make these recommendations, and if the government of the day didn't want to, accept those recommendations, there was not really much we could do because we just didn't have the numbers. But now it's a different dynamic. Labor might be in government, but they've only got 10 out of the 25. So it is a much different dynamic in terms of, I suppose, 5-way negotiations, if you like. So you've got, Labor, you've got the Greens, you've got the Liberals, but you've also got the two, and they are separate independents. So there is a lot more scope for movement, which I think is going to be a good thing overall for democracy and for the Assembly. The second issue, of course, was the planning changes and reforms that were announced by Chris Steele yesterday in relation to the missing middle. It is only just started, so there is a long process to go, and my understanding is that it'll be open from now until about September in terms of the process as it plays out. And of course, I have no doubts that the NCCC will play a huge role also in engaging with the process for feedback on that issue as well. It is an issue that has been discussed and raised for some time. And in terms of the public consultation, because that was part of the big brief that Ian had sent through to me and your concerns that you've raised about it, that did form a huge part of the reason why the TPP report from the committee came out the way it did. There was very clear, evidence about concerns surrounding public consultation. and many Canberrans feeling that it was very much a tick and flick exercise, and that even with feedback that was provided, they felt that it fell on deaf ears, or people sort of did it as a, yep, we've just done that, but didn't really actually listen or cared to take into consideration that feedback. So that was a concern, and that has been reflected in that report. The other aspect in relation to affordable housing, let's be blunt, there's no easy solution, and then there's no silver bullet. If there was, surely someone would have done something by now. So it takes a number of different levers, some obviously at the territory level, and then there are others that are at the federal level, and others again that are at the whim of factors outside of any government control. So there are a number of factors. In the lead up to the election last year, I was very clear that there are factors, but there are also levers within control of the ACT government that could be exercised to improve housing affordability. And there are many aspects to that. Obviously, the construction industry and the challenges that they faced and are still facing is one part of it. The other aspect, of course, is the fact that in the ACT government controls 100% of residential land release, and the way that they, drip fed the market, if you will. The numbers bear that out. You would see sometimes thousands and thousands of applications for, sometimes 70 blocks, and that, of course, means that it's very competitive. Then the big factor, of course, planning, which we know has been sort of facing a lot of criticism in terms of everything from the fact that it's very opaque, through to the lack of consultation, through to lack of enforcement, through to the uncertainty in terms of where things are at. There seems to be inconsistency as well. And despite the fact that they went on this real reform agenda, I don't know that it's actually addressed many of the concerns that were raised by the community time and time again. And then, of course, the other factor is the tax settings. In terms of lease variation charge has been raised over the last couple of weeks. I had that raised with me significantly a number of times, and not just limited to residential, but also commercial as well. And of course, in terms of rates, they do play a small role in terms of that as well. And then, of course, you've probably seen recently there's been a lot of concern raised amongst many people who have been caught up in a sort of what the ABC described, I think, as a robo-debt style, sort of clawback. And that's really distressed a lot of people when it comes to land tax or stamp duty. And that, of course, feeds into not providing much confidence to people when they're purchasing, and that can have an impact too. And then, of course, there are, some factors outside of our control, negative gearing, all of those issues which are in the federal sphere, and then, of course, the interest rate cuts and what have you, and supply chain issues. So there are also factors too. So I guess in that long-winded way, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not sitting here, easy in opposition to say, well, you know what, you've been in government, you fix it all. But there are factors that are within ACT government control that can be exercised. And, the policy position that we pushed out in the lead up to the election was designed squarely to ensure that we did what we could to improve housing affordability. There's also access issues in terms of housing choice. So whilst, I do have sympathy for the push that has come for the missing middle, having options when it comes to duplexes and townhousing and, low-rise apartments and what have you, we do need to make sure that, number one, they're complying with community expectations and planning laws, but at the same time also keeping in character of what we love about Canberra, right? The fact that we are a bush capital, the fact that we have access to green space, and that it is livable. And so that's always going to be a challenge. But I think for too long now, the ACT government hasn't quite got that right. So, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've got all the answers, especially 6 months into the new term. And obviously, there'll be a lot more discussion to be had. But what I do want to assure you is that, my priority, of course, being a local member, is that I listen to the community and make sure that we are taking on the feedback that seems to be ignored. I caught up with Marianne actually not that long ago in relation to, the tower at Ainsley, and, these local issues are really important. And I want to assure you that, I will always take your views seriously. So I hope that's a bit of a nutshell kind of thing about where things are at the moment. But certainly if there's any other issues that you'd like to raise with me, please do feel free.
Thanks heaps, Elizabeth. Any questions for Elizabeth? Ian.
I've got one. Thanks very much for coming along, and you're the first Kurrajong representative to talk on those two issues of public housing and community engagement. I was wondering, Elizabeth, whether you've got how you would see public consultation being more effective, especially in the planning and development sphere. I think the NCCC, especially led by Joachim, has had the view that the district strategies should be living documents, and that the community can have an influence about how those district strategies are laid out. And I think there's a lot of good ideas in the district strategies, but one of the problems is that while developers can nominate areas for development, specifically, say Ioane, say the Ainsley Footy Club, say the Racing Club, the community cannot nominate areas that they believe would be great for the environment, great for public housing, great for other things. So I think we'd like to see some sort of forum within the planning authority where the community can have direct engagement in how the district strategies reflect what the local community is looking for. How do we protect the community facilities that we have so that they're not deconcessionalised and then just sold off for residential, for example? Why aren't we putting a lot more effort into funding really important community facilities, not just swimming pools, which of course the government seems to have decided that's not part of their business, even though communities really love swimming pools, but other community facilities as well. So I was just wondering what your view is on how you'd see a good vehicle for ensuring community engagement.
Yeah, no, and that's a really important question, and thanks, Ian. And it's funny because when you were talking about what can we do to improve it, and I reflect back on some of the feedback that I've received about the concerns most people have had about the lack of community consultation, and it's really interesting because a lot of the times the government tends to sort of palm off a consultation as something that the proponent has done, but then they sort of tick it off as they've done it as well, and they don't really actually make an effort to do it. So I've had that done. The other one, and it seems to be such a simple thing, but sometimes I think people think that they do it on purpose, and that is the timing of it. So I've had so much feedback from people who've said, oh, they released it, sort of like second week of December, and it closes, third week of January, and it's almost like people sort of are doing it by stealth and hoping that it will sort of go through while people are away or on holidays or, whatever it is. So it's those things that I think really do have an negative impact on the confidence that the public has. And so if the public doesn't have confidence in the process itself and the way it's done, then they're not going to have process in the outcome of the result either. So that's really important to build that trust. And at the moment, I think there's been a lot of trust broken down. So that's a really, really big factor. And certainly if we had been a new government, that would have been an opportunity for us to actually start from scratch on that trust building front. So that's really important. It's a really interesting proposal that you raised about community nomination in terms of the what they want to see in their community. So let me take that on board, because I think that's a really interesting one in terms of logistically how that might play out and what we can do about that. So I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on this? And I share, because I'm not quite sure whether everybody knows what district strategies are. And I just share a picture here to explain it. So district strategies are a spatial map of changes that are coming to, for instance, North Canberra. And these are immediate changes. You can see sort of along the northbound corridor, and then bits of here of Giovanni Golf Club and the Thoroughbred Park, and then North Watson, and so on and so on. And then changes that are coming a bit further on. Question is what happens to Thoroughbred Park, and then northbound corridor penetrating into current suburbs, and then distant changes that may involve Epic, and so on and so on. So that's one thing. It's a spatial map of what the planners think is going to happen in the forward years. The other thing the district strategies do is spatially map, for instance, what they call the blue-green network of Canberra Nature Park areas, but also sort of just green areas connecting across North Canberra. Or in this examples, the community facilities from medical to social facilities to schools and so on and so on, and to what they call sustainable neighborhoods, sort of how the different parts of North Canberra connect up, like Hackett to Dixon, and so on and so on. So it's a spatial representation of what we are and what our assets are, and what is lacking is what the needs are. A spatial mapping of where could public housing go close to facilities and public transport? Where are the community needs in terms of places to assemble and places to meet, and kids' playground and so on? The other thing is there is no mapping of future infrastructure needs. And that is what Elizabeth just pointed to, is our fight with telecommunication towers that pop up all over the place without any planning, without any apparent consultation between the planning agencies and the telcos, saying, right, in the horizon of the next 10, 15 years, where do you need infrastructure? And so they pop up like nothing, and suddenly the local communities are confronted with an infrastructure need they didn't see coming. And the last one is a mapping of the biodiversity and climate change preparations that are needed for that, for our a city. So my main point here is, Elizabeth, is what we have been insisting on in all fora. These district plans should be living documents, but the planners think they have been consulted and they are dusted, and there is no need to consult them on a local level. So that's one punchy thing that we think is politically necessary to make these district strategies, these spatial tools for community consultation, into what they're supposed to be, tools for community consultation on a local level.
Yeah, no, I think that makes imminent sense, and I think sometimes it's easy for planners who look at things on a map and kind of go, "Yep, that fits here, and this fits here, and that's that's where it should work." But I think it's important that people who live in the community actually know the community best, and there's certain, I suppose, nuances that we all have in our communities, and the people who live there know it best, and they know the unique nature of it and why something might not work in reality when it looks like it's going to work on paper, especially when you're looking at it from a spatial level. So it is important to keep that going. The other aspect, of course, is that things do change, right? And a lot of the times with a lack of planning, and we do get that a lot, especially in the newer suburbs, with people sort of going, these streets, they can't even actually fit garbage trucks in because they just didn't plan for the growth of population. The other one that I had a lot last term, especially, was in relation to schools being over capacity. And I kind of was like, it's a bit silly for you guys to be sort of saying, yeah, well, we didn't realize there was going to be so many students. And I'm like, but you literally built high rises here. What did you think was going to happen? That no kids were ever going to live in these apartments, So it's a little bit silly for them to sort of rely on that. So it's those things that you kind of go, oh, that's right. Yeah, might need to take that into consideration. And that's where the local community, who knows their community best, comes in. And so, yeah, no, I think that's a very, very valid point.
That's also, there's another thing. I mean, the city is changing, it needs to change. And you need to take community with you and not just clobber everybody who protests about a change that they didn't see coming by saying you are NIMBYs or whatever. That's a cheap way of going about changing a city.
Yep, no, I hear you, definitely. You've got to do it, you need to be, if you're in a privileged position to make decisions on behalf of the community, you've got to take the community with you, right? It's sort of seems to be 101.
Yeah. Any other questions to Elizabeth?
I've
Leon.
got Leon.
Hi, Leon.
Hello. Happy Christmas.
You're late, mate.
Since 1990, the average person has caused about 151 tonnes of greenhouse emissions.
Oh my God.
The average person in Canberra has caused about 900 and is likely to cause a couple more hundred by 2045. Now, the Commissioner for Sustainability and Environment said that 94% of those emissions now are Scope 3 emissions, and made about 10 recommendations about what to do with them. The government has only agreed to implement one of those recommendations, which was basically to consider the issues. Do you think we can do more than that?
I have to confess that I haven't actually had a chance to sit down and read the report as yet. I did see it come out, but it's I haven't had a chance to read it, so I'd be foolish to try and say anything definitive without having read it. But now that you have raised it, Leon, I will go back into it in a bit more detail and speak to the Environment Shadow as well to see where things are at. But it's interesting because, of course, the entire purpose of the establishment of the Commissioner for Sustainability and Environment is to ensure that there is an arm's length in terms of independence when it comes to looking at things, especially what the government can and can't can't do or is not doing in relation to sustainability and the environment. So, without having looked at it, and I'm going to put a proviso on it, it seems to be fairly disappointing if the government's only managed to accept one of the recommendations. And as you said, if it's as lukewarm as they'll consider something, but I will have a look into it in a bit more detail to see whether there's any actual good reasons or whether it's one of those, again, fluffy, yeah, thanks for that, but we'll just keep doing what we do sort of things, which they tend to do from time to time.
Leon, can you put a link into the minutes to these recommendations?
Yep, I can do that.
And thanks. Marianne.
And thank you for coming too, Elizabeth. To see you. I think, Leon, are you referring to the Close to the Edge, the urban expansion report that Dr. Sophie Lewis tabled last week in the legislature?
No.
Got another one. The other one I'd like to also recommend you have, when you have time to read, is that Dr. Sophie Lewis's report that I think she tabled last Thursday, which is titled Close to the Edge, the Effect of Urban Expansion on the Environment. So the two things, obviously, these two reports have probably a lot in common. And this does worry me in terms of moving forward in planning. I do wonder how many planners have got an environmental background and get very concerned about the loss of, as you would know, fragments of very important natural temperate grassland and grassy woodlands and all the other sorts of niche habitats that we have in the ACT. We're a pretty enlightened lot, and it does surprise me that the environment seems to come fairly low in the minds of the planners. And I would recommend that you read Sophie's report. It's salutary. And yes, I also would just like to make an historical comment. When Reed was put here back in 1927, 28, etc., 29, and that's a suburb I can talk about, the planners made sure that it had sewerage, it had infrastructure, it had water, and these were very radical things in 1927. Most places around Australia, including the capital cities, didn't necessarily have these facilities. You would think that, 100 years on, that we'd be much better at establishing and working out where infrastructure should go that includes these towers that are sprouting up everywhere. And I think you know what I mean. So I'll just leave it at that, but please read Sophie's report too, when you have time.
Yeah, thank you. I did see that tabled last week. So it is definitely on my list of to-do as well. So yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Marcus.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Elizabeth, for coming along and talking to us. Just a couple of issues I want to raise. There's been a fair bit of discussion about affordability in Canberra, in Australia, and also throughout the world. Just on my look about on affordability in Canberra, it seems as if property prices in Canberra have been pretty much flatlining for the last 3 years or so, even going down slightly. And I did read I think a report a few months ago saying that Canberra was one of the few places in Australia where affordability was actually slightly increasing, partly because of our high
Incomes, yeah.
Incomes, yes. So in some ways, in comparison to places like Sydney or Perth recently, we're actually doing quite well in terms of affordability, which is not to say that it's easy for anyone, but it does suggest that we are getting some things right here. And part of that could be, and we have discussed this just in the meeting before you arrived, could be some things like the land tax that we have in the ACT, which does discourage land banking and property development, which when things are rezoned in other cities, landowners get this huge windfall, whereas in the ACT, a lot of that profit ends up going back to the government. So sorry, I might have got a bit confused there. There's the least variation charge in the land tax. So the outcome of all of that is, sort of the issue, the settings that we have here, I'm not sure are completely inappropriate, because we seem to be doing in some ways better than other places in maintaining affordability. Now, that's not to say that things like land tax, I mean, when I have looked at land tax, I don't own any rental properties in the ACT, so I don't have to deal with it. But I have looked at it, and it's actually one of the things that discourages me from buying a rental property in the ACT, because of the land tax issue. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because it discourages me buying a rental property, but then it allows that property to be bought by other people who are trying to get into the market as a first homeowner or something like that. So there's a lot of issues there which relate to affordability and taxation, and whether we should be sort of encouraging rental property or encouraging home ownership. And they are very complicated issues, and I'm not sure that that we're actually doing all that badly in the ACT. So I'm wondering whether you have any thoughts about that, and yeah, what your views are on whether those types of things should be changing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Marcus. And, certainly if it came across that way, that wasn't intended. I wasn't standing there trying to sort of go, everything this OCD government's done is really bad and should be chucked out the window. Obviously, there's a lot of uniqueness to the ACT that doesn't exist in the rest of Australia. And in terms of affordability, we do have a much higher average income than many parts of Australia. And so if you take that into consideration in context, then the affordability factor, if you will, does come down a little bit. But at the same time, we are in danger of whilst the average income across the board is high, it's sort of the similar concept to how with the people who are not in that category are going to miss out. And, for the people who are on lower incomes, the people who are single income household, the people who are on benefits, students, because we obviously have a high proportion of students, it does make it incredibly difficult for those people to be able to even think about owning their own home. I had a uni student who's a journalism student who came and interviewed me today for one of the stories, and she said to me that her sort of cohort have all, basically accepted that they're probably going to rent for the rest of their lives. And when you have young people who lose confidence that they're ever going to be able to buy, because they are looking at things from the perspective of where they are now, right? So it's not like they sit there and go, oh, but, if I was earning, 3 times as much, it'd be fine. I could afford that. So they're looking at it from, where their life experience is now. And they are finding it really difficult to have much hope in that regard. Just in terms of not buying rental property, I've had a lot of people who've told me that same as you, Marcus, that the land tax is a huge barrier that is a disincentive for people to buy properties as an investment. But also same with the residential tenancy legislation as well. So there's a lot of people who feel that they don't have much say in what they can do with their own property, and so that's another disincentive for people to buy investment properties as well. I have also heard people sort of make the argument that, but that means that there's properties available for people to purchase. But the people who are renting, a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them do find that to purchase is a different category altogether, and it's still out of their price range. The other aspect, of course, is genuine choice. There are people who will make the choice to rent because it suits their lifestyle. There's more flexibility attached. And I guess where we're coming from is that at the moment, and especially when I was talking to that young person earlier today, they don't seem to have that choice at the moment. And that's what we need to work on. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everything that the ACT government's doing is all wrong. I think that there are aspects that we need to, accept as working. But at the same time, it's like with anything, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, thanks.
Just a brief note on that discussion. I understand that Australia, relative to especially Central European countries, is falling way behind investment in public housing for essential workers. Not only social housing, but public housing for essential workers that would allow these workers to actually come up with the money to buy something. So, what is the problem in Australia?
Yep.
That we've
Yeah.
fallen so far behind, especially in Canberra, that has been grounded on public housing.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting one because in the lead up to the election last year, we actually had a policy in relation to key worker housing, accessibility, and that had a range of options to help and support key workers to be able to access housing, and in two streams. One is obviously rent, but the other one is to help purchase as well. And it would have given a lot more choice to key workers who would have a lot more support to be able to access housing, especially close to where they work as well, because we had heard a lot of feedback from people who, like starting out teachers, or the people who are starting out as bus drivers, or, on the front line, fireys and, nurses, and who were living out in somewhere as far away, sort of Yass and Goulburn, and driving in because they just couldn't afford to live close. And when you're talking about nurses who do shift work, they can't take public transport a lot of the times either. So you can imagine after a long shift, and especially late at night or early in the morning, if they're driving over an hour to Yass and Goulburn, that also has major implications for them as well, and their lifestyle. So we had heard a lot of that as well, and we actually did have a policy in relation to key worker housing program. Obviously the election result was what it was, and we weren't able to get that off the ground. But I agree with you, Joachim. It's something that is something that needs to be looked at.
There's a certain urgency, Elizabeth, because prime land that would be perfect for public housing is rapidly disappearing. Land close to facilities, close to public transport, that would be essential for essential workers. And it's being flogged off at a rapid rate.
Yep, and that also goes back to the fact that, with the ACT, of course, we don't have the advantage that other states do with, natural resources. And so the revenue base is, of course, quite small. It's either going to be taxing a service or taxing land. And with the budget situation the way it is, and we heard the pretty horror story that came out with the mid-year budget review in February. It's pretty dire, and they need to pay for things somehow. And so I'm not saying that they're doing it on purpose and that's the sole reason, but there's no doubt that they do need to make the money somehow. And part of that, a huge part of that, is going to be land.
But Elizabeth, that's where Peter Kane meets David Pocock. We are the national capital. There needs to be some federal input into making it such.
Yeah, yeah. Hear you, yeah.
It's getting late. Thanks heaps for joining us again.
No, thank you, and apologies, and thank you for being accommodating with the time. Wednesday nights, I've actually started doing taekwondo with my daughter who's 5, and it's a mother-daughter thing that we do on Wednesday nights, and we finish at 7:30. So I sort of raced back and had the world's quickest shower so I could join you. So thanks for being accommodating with the time. Thank you for inviting me, and as always, my door is open. So please come and contact me at any time as well, and I'd love to do what I can to be the best local member that I can be for you. So thank you for everything you do as well, because I know the extraordinary amount of time and energy that each of you put into making your community even better.
Hello, Elizabeth. It's Manuel Xerakis. Just want to say
hi. Hi, man.
hi there. Sorry, I can't get my picture up there. I just want to say thank you very much. And as a mother of 2 children, and you made the time and effort to come on board and discuss issues, it's greatly appreciated. And it's nice. And thank you very much for all the work you do.
Oh,
Greatly
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Manuel. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Elizabeth.